Okay, folks, let's see if we can get back into this for just a little while. Um, I don't want to, we're not going to dwell on little things necessarily. I mean, if you have read the source material, particularly the stuff from the uh, Deborah Tracy's little pamphlet, Um, she does a fairly nice job in talking about strategic planning, strategic thinking about strategic plans, that sort of stuff. And so I don't, in terms of thinking about the process of doing it and how you organize it and who's involved and, all those things, I think the detailed pieces of that you can pick up from the source material. We'll talk about it if you want to. And in particular, in a couple of weeks when we start sort of dealing with this a little bit more detail, we can talk about it a bit more. But I just kind of want to put a big broad frame around it right now because it's like so many things, it's not as important to deal with the explicit detail. All those things are, as they say, the devil is in the detail, and so you have to pay attention to the detail elements of it. But you need to understand sort of the conceptual process, the conceptual thought process, and why the strategic planning piece is such a continuous, ongoing thing. It's not something that you think about and then uh, get it done, and then you put it in a drawer and you forget about it. And I've seen that done many, many times. But it is, if it's done right, it can be the sort of the thread that pulls through a building from year to year and month to month and leader to leader until you kind of have a culture that's ingrained within the building. And so it's not the type of thing that's just on paper. It's the type of thing that if you honestly work with it and deal with it, can be very productive for you. I'm sure some of you have been engaged in strategic planning processes. Uh, you may be engaged in one now. I suspect come the end of this year and into the beginning of next year, you'll be in one big time because uh, the schools are going to have to change fairly dramatically because of the circumstances we've been in and the damage that's been done by that, and the awareness as to what we now have available as maybe additional tools. I don't think the virtual tools are going to go away. I think they're going to be there, and they're going to be a little bit of a fallback position, but they're also going to be, for certain circumstances, they're going to be very useful. And I think a lot of school divisions are going to consider a more than 9 month school model. I think it's entirely likely that many states will adopt a full year-round school model, at least for a while. I think once they adopt it, though, they'll never go back. They'll discover it's a very productive model, and for your students, you don't have that drop off that occurs during the summer. Different numbers have been put on that. I think probably the conservative estimate is that students lose about 18 to 20 some 22, 23% of the content that they learned the previous year over the summer in particular content areas. And it's not that they set about to do that, it's just that it's kind of a use it or lose it thing. And so if you're not building on some kinds of content, then that content kind of goes away. Now you can get it back fairly quickly, but every school wastes about maybe the first month or more of the new school year, getting kids back to where they were the previous spring. And so I think there is a lot of push around the country to think about a year-round school model, and I suspect a lot of school divisions will be driven in that direction, but we'll see. In Virginia, where I'm sitting right now, the governor is probably getting ready to announce a funding for a year-round school model, and suggesting that the school divisions go that direction, if not for all students, at least for students that need that have dropped behind a little bit further, and there'll be some equity issues like that. So, I mean, we're going to have an entirely new way of doing school. And so in that mind, almost every school division is going to be doing some sort of strategic modeling or strategic planning to, figure out how to get there, figure out how to make it happen. So don't be surprised if you're engaged in that in the next school year pretty heavily. And so I have some thoughts about strategic planning, and I want to, kind of share those with you, but at the same time elicit some of your thoughts about it as we go along. But I would suggest that if you haven't, you spend the time reading the little Tracy pamphlet, because I think it's a really nice little straight to the point. Here's how you do it, and here's why it's important to do it. But a lot of here's how you do it, and that way it's kind of a meaningful thing. I'm going to go over on my little sketch pad over here. I know you have tears of joy that I'm going to do that, but what can I say? I'm an old teacher, and when we used to talk about mixed methods, I used to think of different colored chalks, things like that. So, okay. Now I'll maybe I can get this a little bigger. Crazy. There we go. Where does a strategic plan process begin? Well, it begins, as I mentioned earlier, partially with this environmental scan. Where are you? What are you going to do? I'll put a graphic like this up on the As You Learn page if you want to do that. Plus, this is on the video. And so you have some data, that's coming from the environmental scan. It's partial data. It doesn't tell you everything, but it tells you, as we were talking earlier, it tells you some perceptions about where big issues might be. Now, each person in the building, each content area, each staff area, resource areas, all those areas need to have their own sort of view of the environmental scan, so you can kind of figure out, where are you, and what are the weak points, what are the points that are gaps, or later on we'll talk about opportunity gaps in a different way, but where are the opportunities? What are the places that you can do things that can improve student learning? Yeah, there'll be some external data. That'll come from not the environmental scan, but it'll come from state data, and it'll come from data that's done within the system that's not part of the environmental scan. It'll come from the kind of data that goes to the feds, the report card data, all that sort of stuff. And so you'll have some additional data, some external data. Plus, if you've had any accreditation visits or things like that, there'll be some data embedded in that will be useful, because those folks are coming from the outside with a completely kind of outside viewpoint. They'll have some thoughts about what's good and what's bad and what's going on. And then you'll have what I lump under community expectations. A lot of things embedded within that. Uh, Schools are an economic engine of the community. If you're a community development person and you're trying to sell your community to different industries or different businesses or whatever, the one of the first, if not the first question they'll ask is, what kind of evidence do you have that your schools are going to produce a workforce for me? That's an economic development question. And it's not just for community colleges. It's for K-12. Now, the other side of that is, I'm going to bring some workforce with me. How good are your schools? How good are my people going to want? How are my people going to want to move there? Are they going to want to bring their kids there and put them in those schools? And so I have some community expectations. Some of them are economic. Some of them are historical. Some of them are traditional. Some of them we have to abandon because they've created cultural dissonance. Maybe we're still having the big battle up here in a couple of school systems in Virginia about getting rid of Confederate names for buildings and Confederate names for school mascots and things like that. And so has to be done, and it will be done, but it's not something that communities easily accept because there are traditions and histories and all that. I think even the folks that fight it realize that it has to happen, it has to go away. But in what way will it happen? And so there are lots of community factors, economic factors, cultural factors, um, tradition, lots of things. Schools are a focus of community. I mean, I grew up in a town and still live in a place where the big thing that happens on Friday night in the fall is football games. I mean, if you want to do some mischievous crime, that's the best time to do it because all the cops and all the people will be at a ball game. You'll hardly see a cop car in town. They're all at the ball game. And so it's like that. They're engines of the community. That's part of the reason we got to get schools back open, because the two engines of the community tend to be schools and churches. And they form the sort of, the pillars of the community, so to speak. And schools might be more important in some communities than even churches, because everybody has a connection to the school. They either went to the school, work at the school, um, have kids in the school, whatever. So schools are the focus of the community. It's where communities go to meet. They have community meetings in the schools. And so you have community expectations about, what that school building and what that school is doing. All those things kind of funnel into this whole process. And then out of that, we have to develop a mission, a clear idea of what the school is about, what's the underlying vision, and what are the values that school engenders in its students and its community. Now, value sometimes is used in a less secular way, but it should, values, I'm talking about, human values and not necessarily spiritual values or things like that. So it's a notion. What do we believe in? What's our underpinning? What are the important things that we hold dear in the community? And what kind of vision does that lead to? I mean, what's the vision for what the schools can do for us? And that leads to a mission. And everything starts embedded in that mission statement, which a good mission statement is maybe 2 or 3 sentences long, no more than a short paragraph. Now, I used to work with a guy that said, yeah, mission statements are important, but they're even better if you can make them a bumper sticker, a 2-word or 3-word bumper sticker. But I don't know about that. But mission statements are to be clear. Uh, they're not overly specific, but they're very directional. In other words, they point the direction and that needs to be improved, while they reinforce the things that you feel strong about. Now, you can look at mission statements from various schools, and I encourage you to do that. And certainly the one that you're going to build sort of your project material around, look at their mission statement. And we'll do some critiquing of those a little bit, and we'll have you develop a mission statement with the school improvement project piece. And so the idea of a mission statement is something that needs to be pretty clear in your mind. Once again, I would suggest that you read the section in the Tracy pamphlet on mission statements. She does a pretty good job of it, reasonable job of it. And if you want me to, I'll provide you with some more resource material on the idea of school mission statements. But they ought to be particular to the community and particular to the school. And they ought to be developed in partnership with all stakeholders. This isn't an executive committee thing or a steering committee thing. There might be a writing committee or an advising committee that drafts maybe one or two or a few, but the selection of a mission statement and the what's in a mission statement should be a process that involves all stakeholders at some point in time. And it's just kind of what it needs to be, because everybody needs to be on board. And everybody needs to know they've had a chance, they've had a voice, they've had a say in it. Now, does that mean everybody in school? No, it means representation from all stakeholders. Maybe it's the PTSA, maybe it's the group, maybe it's a teacher leadership group that you put together. But I mean, you need to have that sort of representation. And from this, everything else in your strategic plan grows. And from this will come some goals. And from the goals will come some strategies. And it gets more and more specific as you go. And then below this are the particular strategies that will be employed, actions that will be employed within buildings, within programs, within different areas of the school, all focused and connected to the same mission, all focused and connected to the same goals. And so with that in mind, then the rest of it is kind of a particularly detailed process in which you identify metrics. How will you measure when you've done these things? Metrics does not mean necessarily that they all have to be quantified, quantitative metrics. They can be objective and qualitative metrics also. But you need to have specific metrics that are attached to specific strategies and specific objectives that grow from those strategies. And then about every 2 years, this whole process, this and everything that goes in the box down here are making it happen, where the sausage is made, so to speak. Every couple of years, you recycle this whole thing back in, and it becomes another input. And so that's the nature of strategic planning. It needs to be at the center of what a school does. At the center of what a school does. And not as an aside that we do every couple of years because the state says we have to do it or the school division wants us to do it. Or not because we get a new principal in the door and suddenly they want a strategic plan. This sort of lasts beyond leadership, beyond principals. Now, have any of you been involved in a process like that? In a building? Have any of you been involved in that sort of strategic planning process?
Dr. Bolt, I was just gonna harp on that. I just recently texted my former principal, and he asked his entire faculty ideas that they wanted to incorporate in them before he even changed any of the mission and vision. So he asked the staff who was already there before he took over, and then they rewrote it from there. But that's how he did it with our whole staff.
Yeah, but he asked for input, but then the senior leadership did it.
Yeah, Dr. Bolt, I'm on the school improvement team at our school, and we revised our mission and vision statements this year. And there were, like, the chairs, I think, came up with there were like 3 versions of it. And then as the SIT team, we voted. And the SIT team comprises, like you said, representation from all different, areas of the school. So that's how we came up with ours.
You had parents involved?
We do have a parent on the SIT committee. Yep.
Any student input?
No, we actually didn't have any student input.
Yeah, that's unusual. I mean, it's I think student input is good, but a lot of places, not many places involve student input because they don't think, wow, how the hell does a student know? Well, students are a lot more aware, at least in middle grades and upper grades, than maybe not in elementary. Well, maybe so. Maybe students, we want more ice cream, but it is important that the parents have a voice, the staff has a voice, not just instructional staff, but also the support staff and services, resource staff. Typically we don't have enough involvement, and that's if there's an issue that occurs, it's generally because we don't have enough involvement. But it may or may not, it depends on the circumstances that are happening locally and the way it's organized. But a lot of places it doesn't take a very high priority. It kind of lags back a little bit, and there's a inertia that happens, and people don't want to do things differently or don't want to change anything or stuff like that. But if you change the mission statement by default, you should be changing strategies.
Dr. Bolt, I have a question. So you had said that it should last beyond the leadership and the principals, but I feel like every time I've had a lot of principals coming and going, and I feel like every time they've come in, they've changed it. They've made it their own. So, like, should it be staying through them, or should they have their input? Like,
you want my thoughts, or you want?
Yeah.
My thought is that it can be modified. There's no reason to throw it out and start fresh, start from scratch, which is what a lot of principals want to do. They want to wipe the board clean and don't want to have anything left from the previous iteration. But I think that's kind of foolish. If it's been developed based around the needs of the community, which it should, and not just, what makes it a better place to work or whatever, but around the needs of the community, particularly when you're talking about opportunity gaps and things like that, then, why would you throw everything out just because you come in with a different leadership style and maybe a different thought about some things? If those are useful, then certainly, yeah, you can fold it into that process. But strategic plan is not a disposable. It's a recyclable thing. And so you in my mind, you take a look at where you're at, and then you kind of work through the process to see where it goes. When I took over a department years ago at a university, the dean said, or, you need to do a new strategic plan. And I said, well, I'd like to see the old one first. I haven't, I've been here for 10 years, 10 or 12 years, and I don't think I've ever seen the original, the other one. And so, we started from there. We started from the fact there was an existing strategic plan, and we spent, it wasn't all of our time, but we spent the best part of a year and a half going through that strategic plan and doing sort of this environmental scan thing, look at the data, seeing kind of what was going on and where we were at. And, I think the faculty and the staff came to realize that we had gotten stagnant in some areas. And so we made a few changes, but it wasn't like we threw the whole thing out. We had the thing there in front of us. And, it was a matter of tweaking and maybe changing direction in a couple of places. And, some strategies were, out of touch, out of time. So we went a different direction on some things, but probably 65, 70% of the strategic plan was the same, 4 years out as it was when I walked in the door. And then the next person in the door after me, who was one of our faculty members, she did the same sort of thing. She didn't throw it out. She said, okay, well, let's see, because, I also believe that leadership in a building shouldn't last more than 5 years, but that's another story. Because I think you do get some inertia and some blind spots and some staleness in how you approach certain things. And it's good to have a different view, different voice, different face, but not necessarily throw everything out, because I don't think any building is a failure. I think you always have good people in a building. Maybe they haven't had good leadership. Maybe they haven't had a focus, but there's no sense throwing out, what works or what's good. So I think you have to measure and look at things, and it's an ongoing thing. It's, in my mind, it's an every year or two thing that you go in and you tweak the strategic plan every year based on the data you got from the last year. So, but it is a habit that kind of perpetuates itself. I don't think it's necessarily a habit that we need to keep. I think it's a habit we can break, of throwing everything out when you walk in a building and feeling like you have to start from scratch. I mean, I don't think that's ever the case. If you'd asked me 10, 20 years ago, I'd have said, sure, yeah, yours, throw the whole thing out and start over. No, I just don't see that as manageable. Some of you may have other thoughts about that, though.
In one of my schools, we've had 3 principals in 3 years, and they've each tried to do something totally different. And it's just kind of created this like uncertainty. Nobody really knows what's, what direction to go in. And they all have meaningful, thought processes, and they've tried to talk to the staff to find out what they want. But I feel like we're just spinning our wheels constantly.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have a starting point. And if anything, in my thought process, we try to do too many things simultaneously without identifying, the key issue or the key weakness. typically there's, you know, I go back to the school turnaround stuff we did. We always identified no more than 2 issues the first year to work on. Now, we said those are the 2 biggies, and sometimes it was only one. Sometimes we figured out there was, you know, there's a real weakness here in one area, and we got to fix that. And so let's get everybody on board. Let's work that through and see if we can get, you know, a resolution on that, fix that. And then we'll go from there. And at the end of the year, we'll see where we're at. We'll see how we're going. And then we'll come around the next year and, you know, kind of make a decision. Do we want to add more to the mix, or do we want to, are we not quite done with that? We had a real useful thing that we did, and I know schools can't do it, but we did a thing called Data in a Day. Have y'all ever heard of Data in a Day? We would, on the couple of things we were working on and the strategies that we had identified, and the school was focused on those strategies. At the end of the school year, we'd bring in teams of 2 or 3. They were generally people either, you know, from central office or from other school divisions, or retired teachers, retired principals. We put a parent with them in each team. You know, sometimes we'd put in some schools, with high schools in particular, we'd put a student with them. And we would, you know, early in the morning when we got there, we would get those teams organized, do a little, you know, training piece. We didn't want to overtrain them, you know, half hour or so like that. And we had an instrument that focused on just those specific strategies that we're trying to do. Like I remember one school, we were trying to do reteaching as a strategy, because they were having a particular problem with, you know, students that were had different learning styles or different modes of learning. And so we spent the entire year focusing on reteaching. And so we brought in some resources, and we did some, you know, peer-to-peer training and things like that. And so it was all this idea of reteaching. And so we had these checklists and these strategies, and we'd send these teams out, and the teams would get into every classroom in the building to see every teacher, at least one team, during the day for at least 30 minutes. And since we were focusing on particular strategies, in this case, reteaching, it was easy to see if any reteaching was occurring. Now, we know that some teachers would be doing tests, and some teachers would be doing different things that might not involve a lot of reteaching. And that was something we were aware of. And then, you know, as the day got long, toward the end of the day, we would gather all those sheets. And then I would sit down in a room with a doc student or a grad student I had co-opted, and we would organize all that data from all those sheets and give them a picture, a snapshot of how reteaching was going in the building and what was being done in different programs. And, you know, was there more of it occurring in one program as opposed to the other? Was it occurring more in the morning, the afternoon? You know, all those things. We didn't look at individual teachers. We weren't interested in individual teachers. We just wanted to know, had we changed the culture of the building to get reteaching in the building? And if we had, and if the faculty and the staff and the administrators all agreed that, okay, we kind of got that one, we're going to keep an eye on that. Now let's set a new goal for next year. But only after we had done what they saw as the most important goal to do, which was in their mind, the reteaching piece. And so we did that Data in a Day, and I guess probably did it in 25 or 30 schools over a 4 or 5 year period. I got so tired of the daggone thing, I just drove me nuts, but I knew it had to be done. And so it was one of those strategies that was very effective because it was all focused around the community. The people that were the teams were from the community, the kids, the students we used from within the building, you know, retired teachers or from, you know, the community. So the community was taking a look at that school and focusing at the activity or the behaviors that were on their checklist. Now that's all they were looking at. They weren't looking at other things, but we're focusing on a particular thing. And so that became a, you know, a very productive way of you know, seeing where we were. But we only worked on one or two things a year, and it almost always was highly effective doing it that way. In fact, I can't think of a school that we didn't improve significantly doing that. Yeah. So the idea of I think what most schools get off kind of off the slide with is they try to do too much all at the same time, and you just can't do too much all at the same time. You got to focus, have a very distinct focus, and then you got to use the data. You know, use the data to help you understand how you're doing. But yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't do it, but you know, it's you've experienced that, and as you say, you've seen what it does to a school. It keeps you constantly off, you know, kind of off guard because you don't know what's coming next. And if you have a focus and you have this strategic plan that kind of keeps carrying forth, even though you may retool it or you tweak it or you change a thing or two or whatever, if you have it keep carrying forth, then it still reflects the community. And you know, you don't find yourself going in all sorts of directions. What bothers me the most is that, you know, new administrators will fall in love with a particular technique or a particular book or a particular strategy that they think is hot stuff, you know, the 7 great ways to do this, that, or the other. I'm sorry if I pick on Covey because I think that man is absolutely the dumbest man on the planet, but that's another story. But you know, this idea of having a checklist, you know, 7 things to do here and 6 things to do there and 4 things to do there, and you know, the Harry Wong thing of, you know, forget it. I don't want to go there, but I think it's much more. You're wasting money on stuff like that because you can do what you need to do in your building. You just have to have some focus to it, and you know, not think that there's a magic cure that's going to come from the outside, because yeah, there is no magic in school improvement. It's just focused hard work. That's all it is, focused hard work. So I'll get off my soapbox, but any thoughts before I'll let you go. I know you're itching to eat something and take a bath and go to bed, or you know, tell the kids to be quiet, or I don't know, whatever. Drink something. I don't know. Whatever it is you got in mind to do tonight. But, you know, feel free. Any thoughts about this before we kind of put a wrap on it tonight? We're not done with this, but, you know, we're going to be much more precise about, you know, the strategies and all that as we kind of pick it up in a couple of weeks. Are you feel comfortable in knowing what you have to do for next week? The groups, get the groups organized. I mean, you put your teams together and you figure out you know, who's in charge, and begin that discussion, and go from there. Figure out how you're going to meet. You know, set up a Zoom session, set up a Google meeting. You know, whatever it is, whatever you do it. But you're in charge of the organizing of those things. The only requirement is that everybody has to be on board. See how you like herding cats. Okay. Well, folks, go do whatever it is you're going to do. I'll get these videos up in a day or so. I'll make sure I put up a little bit more structured graphic about strategic planning, and so you'll have you know, something a little bit better to work for. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And if you run into any problems or anything, give me a yell, and I'll do a one-on-one, or I'll, you know, even push come to shove, I'll meet with a group if you have specific questions about things. But right now, we just need to get the groups organized so we know, who's talking to who. All right, folks, have a good evening. Stay safe. By the time we get back together, I will have been vaccinated. Well, at least once, but I figure the first one's the big one, and then, we'll go from there. So have a good evening.
Dr. Bolt, I had to add that I'm currently in a Leader in Me school. We achieved the whole Lighthouse study, or this Lighthouse status, in such a pyramid scheme. It's
Yeah, it is.
enormous waste. Flavor of the month, waste of time. But after spending 7 years immersed in this program, I just kind of had to add that, because it's just a point of frustration. But I feel like character education is something that good teachers, quality teachers, need to be trusted to do, and do intrinsically on a daily basis. And we spent literally thousands and thousands of dollars for this essentially piece of paper certification that means little nothing. So that's just sorry, that's my soapbox.
Yeah. I never have been. Yeah, I've always felt that it's really difficult to think that someone outside the loop that doesn't know the school, doesn't know the culture and all, is going to solve your issues. And I don't think there's one medicine for everything.
Right.
Like somebody said in the chat, I think that is snake oil. Sort of idea. But yeah, I think it just takes focus.
Sure.
Work and focus. I mean, I think that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck. Just work and focus. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And sorry, I didn't mean to take more of your time. I heard
No,
you
that's
say
fine.
that.
That's fine. I got no place to. I'm sitting right here.
All right.
Okay.
You have a good night.
All right. Thanks, Sam. See you later.